Hey, what's going on, fellow side hustlers? Amir Baluch, your host of the Virtual Summit. And I know some of you guys, for various reasons, are looking for some non-clinical career choices after being in medicine for a few years and maybe a few decades. So we have today Dr. Michelle Bailey. She's an assistant consulting professor at Duke Pediatric Department. She's also a certified life coach and founder of the Michelle Bailey and Company, LLC. She's an integrative medicine fellow from University of Arizona. She's also an international speaker on physician well-being and the author of Parenting Your Stressed Child. So thanks for coming on board, Michelle, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say about everything that's going on.
Thanks for having me, Amir.
Yeah, so I mean, you already were doing pediatrics for a while, probably loving life, seeing patients, and now you get to be a doctor and advancing your career. But then for some reason you were called to maybe go to a non-clinical career path. How did that come about? How did you make that decision?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, there were two big things that happened that were the impetus for me to make the change. One was I was a grandma at the time, a beautiful little grandson who was 5 years old, and he was over at the house, and he went to ask my wife a question, which really would fall into my area. And she said, "Why don't you ask grandma?" And he said, "Grandma's working." And it was the way he said it, I was practicing primary care pediatrics, and we were in the era of electronic health records. And so the laptop was always with me at home as I was trying to finish up clinic notes and things like that. And it broke my heart. I was really close with my grandmother, and I wanted to establish that same type of relationship with my grandson. Yeah. And so, in that moment, I thought to myself, I never want him to think that work is more important than him. And somehow that's the message that I've given him. And so that occurred about 3 months before I had a heart attack scare. I was in clinic. It was 4 days before Christmas. I was seeing patients. And like most groups, we would have a call schedule where you would work a long portion around the Christmas holiday, and then the other half of the group would work around the New Year's holiday. So I knew I had some time off that was coming up, and I was having chest pain in clinic. And I thought to myself, it's probably indigestion. It was like late afternoon. And I walked into the workroom that I shared with an internal medicine colleague. And she looked at me and she said, "Hey, you don't look so good. Are you okay?" And I knew I didn't feel good, but I didn't know that it showed on the outside. And I said, "Well, I'm just having a little chest pain, but I'll sort it out after I see these last couple of kids and finish up clinic." And she took the chart out of my hand and she said, "Sit down, tell me about this chest pain." And I was telling her, what I was experiencing. And she really pressured me to go to the emergency room. And I was acting like a petulant little toddler because I didn't want to go to the emergency room. I felt like I was going to be embarrassed in front of my colleagues, and this was probably all just indigestion. And it wasn't until the attending came to talk to me and she relayed my story to me as a clinical vignette. And then I heard it. And she said, "So that's why we need to admit you to rule out MI." And I will tell you, fortunately, it was not an MI, but she told me if some things didn't change, I would likely be back in the emergency room. And that time it might be the real thing. And shortly after that, about a few weeks after that, I went on a silent meditation retreat with my wife. And she had been pressuring me for a long time to do that. And it was 4 days of just being with myself and my own thoughts. And at the end of that period of time, I realized my job was literally killing me. And it was then that I made the decision that I was going to leave clinical practice. I had been trying for years prior to that to do different things to make life more workable. But I think in those moments, I just realized that, this isn't sustainable for me in the long term.
Yeah. I think a lot of people kind of forget about the stresses that we go through. And, as doctors, I mean, working 80 hours, staying up late and bringing work back home and eating on the run, things like that. So,
Yeah.
I work with a lot of surgeons too, and I always see them bent over and they got to have some neck pain after a while. Like, at some point we got to take care of ourselves, right?
That's it. We put everybody else first. And, we always end up at the bottom of our own to-do list, if we make the list at all.
Yeah. So eventually, you found a non-clinical career. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you do now?
Yeah. So I had a friend who I had done residency with, and she had made the jump to a non-clinical career about a year prior. And I didn't really understand what she did. I just knew she seemed happier. And she called me up and she said, hey, we are about to hire another pediatrician because we're getting so much pediatric business. Are you interested? And I said yes, simply because I wanted to explore something that could potentially make me happier.
Yeah.
And I went for the job interview and I was offered the position. And I asked them, I'm like, are you sure? Because I'm not a researcher. And this was working for a clinical research organization. So these are companies that get hired by pharmaceutical or biotech companies to execute the running of the clinical trials when you're trying to bring a new drug or device to market. So I said yes, and it truly was a leap of faith, but I knew that it checked off these boxes that I decided I needed in my next career. Yeah. So now I'm a medical director for a contract research organization, and I oversee and review safety data for children who are enrolled in clinical pediatric trials.
Got it. Yeah. And I know a lot of physicians have reached out to you since you successfully found a non-clinical career. What do you think are the main reasons other doctors are looking for a non-clinical career?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. The top ones are at some point they realize what we were just talking about, which is that this isn't sustainable for the long term because they are always giving to everyone else, and work has completely dominated their life, and they don't have any time for themselves, for their family, and just being able to take care of themselves in the way they're always encouraging patients to take care of themselves. So that's a top reason. And then also, I think, there's not just burnout. That term is used so often, but there really is truly an emotional exhaustion. I used to talk to docs and tell them, it's almost like we experience these micro traumas on a day-to-day basis, and we don't truly appreciate the impact that has over time. And you don't really have anyone that you can talk to about it, except for other physicians who are going through it. But I think that's one of the issues as well, is there's just this idea of not just emotional exhaustion, but a kind of depletion that's happening. And physicians are starting to realize, like if something doesn't change, it's going to be at the cost of my health and in some cases my very life.
Yeah. I could totally see that. I see a lot of people just losing motivation and all the exhaustion, adding up in their lives. So yeah, I could totally see why people want to choose a non-clinical career. And I see people looking and talking about it, in the doctor's lounge. So like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. They don't really have any guidance on, how to even get started. You've probably seen a lot of people make mistakes. I mean, what if they just choose a non-clinical career and it's wrong for them? What are some of these mistakes that you've seen people make when they're trying to pick a new path?
Yeah, so one of the mistakes that I see often is looking at someone else who's made the transition and saying, oh, okay, well, they're doing utilization management and they seem happy, so maybe that's what I should pursue. Without really taking a step back to decide if that's a good fit for you, right? It might be a good fit for somebody else, but it may not necessarily support the life that you're wanting to create in this next phase of your career. So taking the time to get clear on what it is you want and why you want it is really going to be helpful. Because there's this saying, wherever you go, there you are. So if you don't address some of the underlying frustrations and issues in your current position, you're likely to take those with you into the next position. So that's a mistake that I often see. And then also really just looking at what are the tactics to try and land a new non-clinical career, like converting your CV to a resume and making sure it has these terms. And, oh, I need to, put a LinkedIn profile up there, and I need to network with people, but not really having sort of a bigger picture strategic plan, and understanding what your destination is so that you can create a plan to help you get there in a way that makes some sense.
Okay. Well, that makes sense there. So on top of, choosing this non-clinical career, now you have all these, physicians reaching out to you. You've also decided now to become a life coach. So tell us a little bit more about that. How's that going?
Yeah, it happened kind of organically. It wasn't something that I intentionally was planning to do, but I did see a lot of physicians who were reaching out to me as I posted on social media about the position that I'm in and appreciating the fact that I get to work remotely and I don't have the commute anymore, and I have a lot more time freedom and flexibility, and not to mention that in my case, I'm actually making more than I was when I was in clinical practice. And so enough doctors continued to reach out to me, and I was providing some guidance and support to them, and decided, it would be good if I had some actual training in coaching people. I did that in my former career because I was at an academic institution. And so informally, I coached and mentored, I don't know, probably hundreds of medical students and residents and fellows, and even supported some of my junior colleagues. But that's why I decided to go and get training to become a life coach. And the other thing that I realized that was really important is the fact that sometimes we just focus on our career and we think the career is the problem. Like, once I get a better career, my life will be all better. And that's not necessarily the case. That, you can't just pull out and separate the work that you do from the life that you're living. It's all integrated. And so understanding how issues that arise in our own lives, getting a better sense of the patterns that we have that sometimes self-sabotage our success and our progress and happiness, has been really beneficial, not just in my own personal life, but getting to share that with other physicians and helping them see ways that they can be happy before they make the leap to a non-clinical career.
I'm kind of curious. I know you've worked with dozens of doctors now, and I know a handful of clinical careers, but what are some examples of non-clinical careers that people have jumped into after talking to you? So I think a lot of people in the audience are maybe just thinking maybe 2 or 3 things you could do. What have you seen other people do?
Oh my gosh. So there's so many things that you can do. And we are not exposed to this during our medical training. So we usually think there's 2 paths. Either you become a researcher or you practice clinically, right? And there's like nothing else. But there's so many opportunities out there for physicians. So I'm grateful that you're hosting this summit. But for my clients, some of them have gone on to do what I'm doing, which is to become a medical director for a contract research organization. I have one physician who has moved on to a medical director position with a large pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
Another physician who has decided to become a medical director for her local health department. It just so happened that the timing of it was that they were building a new health department in her county. And she was a little bit concerned that she wouldn't be qualified because she didn't have an MPH, but she was always very interested in population health and sort of wanting to serve on a community level. And with some coaching, she realized that she did have the qualification. She just needed to learn how to articulate the skills and experience that she already had to translate into what they were looking for in that position. And so she was able to successfully make the leap.
Awesome. Awesome. We know that this last part of this interview, I've seen you with the biggest smile as you're kind of recounting how these people were successfully transitioning. So, I think for that reason alone, if people got any questions, they should be reaching out to you about the transition. How do people get a hold of you if they want any advice or some coaching on how to figure things out and move away from clinical and go to non-clinical pathways?
Sure. So I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. And you'll have the links there for people to be able to connect with me. You can also feel free to reach out to me via email. My email address is Michelle with 2 L's at drmichellebailey.com. And that's drmichellebailey.com.
Got it. Well, there you guys have it. If you want to take a shortcut and get some mentorship, if you're going into a non-clinical career, we got Michelle here. We got links below the video and also in your email and also in the Facebook group. So take a look at that and don't be afraid to reach out for some mentorship. That's what this summit is all about. All right, Michelle, thanks for sharing these stories with us and dropping some knowledge on the audience today.
Yeah, thanks, Amir. Pleasure to be here.